All right, great to see everybody here tonight or this evening. Excuse me. Please be seated if you're standing. Welcome to another class of the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program Teacher Certification course. This course is designed for you, the teacher, the aspiring teacher, and we try, those that have been teaching the Peaceful Solution for a long time, we try to share with you what we've learned over this period of time and some of the some examples and some of the things we've been through and so forth to give you an idea of what might come your way. And we also try to give you an idea of what to expect when you're working with students and so forth to prepare you as best we can for teaching the Peaceful Solution. Tonight this evening we're in the Peaceful Solution Parenting Manual. And we will be going to the lesson plan in just a minute, but if you will start out, let's go back to page 17. Educaton opened up the lesson number 3. I'm just going to give a quick reminder of a few things that he covered. He talked about the roles of a teacher and provider and disciplinarian can only be successfully achieved when parents develop positive character. Yeah, if you don't have positive character and you're going to be the disciplinarian, your idea of discipline is probably different than what it really should be. A lot of people think discipline is whacking a child and beating them half to death and screaming and yelling at them and calling them names and everything. Well, they got to be disciplined, Well, that's not true. That's not what discipline is. Discipline, if you could look at that word and see that, for instance, we discipline ourselves sometimes. I don't make myself go stand in the corner. I don't get something and start spanking myself or something, kicking myself. But we discipline ourselves. If I decide that I want to slow down on eating so much, then I discipline myself to do that. I make up my mind that I'm not going to do that, and I'm disciplining myself. And it's the same thing we do with children. We keep teaching. We teach them. We show them the benefit of doing things the proper way, and then the consequences of doing things the improper way, and then let them make their decisions. Okay, so as a great parent, we've got to have patience, self-respect, and respect for your children, and these are some of the character traits we must have. And then Educaton talked about the difference between character and personality, and talked about how characters develop. And then in the box on page 17, talked about moral principles being the foundation of character, and where do you get some of the things from that you're going through, some of your ideas and thoughts and values and so forth from genetics and the environment and influences all around you. Just zipping through these pretty quick. And then on page 18 and 19, there's a complete list of some positive character traits that you can take a look at and get a little more understanding about them, especially those of you that are online or those of you that are brand new, whether here in the meeting room or online. You can go there and look at what these positive character traits are. And on the other page, page 19, is a list of negative character traits for you to look at. And you might notice something about yourself when looking at these. You might see yourself in some of the positive character traits and think, oh, you know what? I've always been very patient with people. And, then you might look at negative character traits and see some things that you might want to work on. So I like the little quote at the bottom of page 19. It says, positive traits are to character what a strong foundation is to a house. And then personality is what, like, shutters and flowers are to a house. It's that personality. It gives it a little pizzazz, so to speak. All right. And Educaton started out and he covered a few of the procedures, and we moved on over to, I think we're right there at procedure number 7. If he went over a little bit, I can't remember if he did or not, but we're going to go ahead and just talk about procedure number 7 right there. In the parenting manual, it is a teacher's manual, and so if you'll look at lesson plan 3, page 3B, and procedure number 7. So when you're teaching this, and the parenting manual is an interesting manual in that most people have brought their children up through trial and error. Our parents brought us up through trial and error, and basically a little bit what they learned from their parents. And, my mama did it this way and you're going to do it this way. My daddy did it this way and I'm doing it this way, that type thing. And that's where a lot of this whole families that are Republican or Democrat or Catholic or, Jewish or whatever, it's there. It's taught to them. They're brought up in it, But anyways, let's get back on this. So the parenting manual itself, though, is a way to first prepare yourself for being a parent, and then how to teach your child once the child is born, and then bring them up so they're a great individual. All right. So number 7. So we would ask our students, what's the first thing we should do to develop a positive moral character? Now, of course, a lot of you, especially here in the meeting room, and some of you online too, already know the answer to that would be that we would want to look at the peaceful solution, learn from the peaceful solution, build our character. It says, what's the first thing we should do to develop a positive moral character? Well, you can't just say in your mind, oh yeah, well, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be positive from now on. I'm going to be a positive character from now on. You can't. It doesn't work like that. You can't just do it that way. You have to have a teacher. You have to have a guide, and this is what the peaceful solution is. Okay, and then of course being a teacher of the peaceful solution. And then it says, discuss the first 2 paragraphs under the heading, taking on a positive moral character on page 20. So we're going to do that in just a minute. And the first step to developing a positive moral character is to evaluate your own character based on their responses to moral situations, and we're going to do that. So that's actually the first thing we should do to develop a positive moral character, is we should find out where we're at. Yes, we need the peaceful solution, but before you even know you need it, I guess you would need to find out where you're at. You have to assess the problem. You have to look at it and then come to a conclusion that, yeah, I need help here. Okay, so that would be the first step. Excuse me. Let's go on over to page 20. And we're going to look at the first 2 paragraphs on page 20. You'll be backing up, actually. I'm going to look at the first couple paragraphs. So on page 20, it says, taking on a positive moral character, it is clear to see that the skills of an effective parent depend on having a positive moral character. Remember, a moral character is one that's caring and concerned about others, about self, about property and the environment and all life. Now, why does a parent have to have those skills? Okay, we're getting there. Traits such as responsibility, self-control, compassion, and patience will enable you to maintain a positive moral character and to make positive decisions in order to care for your children and provide them with all of their physical and emotional needs. So see, we're already learning that in order to be a great parent and supply for our children, we really need to have these things inside us. And again, you can look at some of those positive character traits and see them over on page 18 on that list. You can see what was just listed, some of them. Then negative traits, such as being disrespectful, impatience, irresponsibility, and lack of discipline and lack of self-control, can and will lead to abuse and neglect. You wonder, well, how is that so? Just because I don't have self-control? Well, all these things build together, and then they grow and grow and grow, and yes, it can lead to the abuse and neglect. Every year, more parents physically, sexually, and emotionally abuse their children. If these parents interacted using positive character traits such as self-control, patience, and respect, these abuses would never occur. So think about that for a minute. You know, there's a lot of that goes on. I mean, we hear about it all the time. In fact, one of the, in a class yesterday, we saw somebody present an article that showed that 1 out of 4 girls were sexually abused, and 1 out of 14, 1 out of 4, and 1 out of 14, I think, on boys, if I'm correct. I might have those turned around, but anyway, are sexually abused, whether in the home, in the school, in the church, whatever the case might be, by trusted people that were trusted by the individual, by the parents, and so forth. So this is pretty bad. And why would those people do those things? Well, it's because they haven't been taught. They haven't been taught how to control their impulses, their urges. They haven't been taught what not to look at and what to look at. I mean, I know there's plenty of families that run around, you know, half naked in the house in front of each other, you know, and that should not be something that takes place. It only leads to these type of things. So, but that's a common thing out people who have not learned, people who don't have this wonderful guide, this wonderful parenting manual showing us what we should do. The only thing they have to go by is how they were raised, and their parents didn't know any better either. So, think about those things. Let's go on back to the lesson plan for a minute. So that was, you know, we could discuss the first 2 paragraphs for a while on taking on that positive moral character, but the first step to developing the positive moral character is to evaluate, which we're going to do here in a moment. Procedure number 8 says, ask students for some examples of moral situations that we might encounter. And of course, it gives you a couple suggestions here. You can be thinking about that. What are some examples of moral situations that we might encounter on a day-to-day basis? Are you thinking about it right now? Got it in your head? Think about it. At work, at home, driving down the road. What are some of the situations that we might encounter? Well, possible answers could include whether or not to return lost property, touching, using or borrowing someone's possessions without permission. That's called stealing. Taking a longer lunch break than you're scheduled for. You know, if your lunch break starts at 12, then take your lunch break at 12, and it's over with at 1, not 1:05. If you have previous permission, and contact your supervisor and say, hey, look, I need to finish up something here. It's going to be about 5 more minutes. Is it okay if I stay 5 more minutes and come back 5 minutes late? And the supervisor agrees, then fine. If you do it on your own, then, you know, you're really not covered. You just did it on your own. That's just one example, but it's there in the book. But again, you can see one of the suggestions there, one of the answers, possible answers, is talking about touching, using, or borrowing someone else's possessions without permission. Notice it says touching, so just touching it. You know, you put your cooties all over it, and maybe the person didn't want it touched by anybody. Might be they didn't want anybody else's germs on their pen or pencil or drinking cup or fork or, you know, whatever. You know, you can come with some type of example on that. Okay. So, also it says to stress the importance of also evaluating our thoughts and behavior in order to weed out undesirable traits. Have volunteers to read the next 4 paragraphs on page 20 on their own time. Well, we're going to do it a little bit differently. We're going to go ahead and read the next 4 paragraphs here on our time. So it's your time, my time, our time, okay? All right. So back to page 20. To become a positive, effective parent, you must carefully evaluate your character in order to weed out negative, undesirable traits. So remember, we've got a page back there, 2 pages, positive and negative character traits. Look at them, see where you're at, but we're going to go a little deeper. Everyone has traits that are less than desirable. Do you see where that says everyone? Yeah, everybody. Nobody that I know is perfect. I'm not perfect. We all have some traits within us that are not desirable. Now, it's real easy to point out someone else's faults, but it's not so great when someone points your faults out to you. You know, we have to learn to accept that sometimes that might come, though. But if we're great at pointing out other people's faults and don't want ours pointed out, there's a problem there. Or if we're not willing to look at our own faults and look for ourselves and even find them, there's a problem there. And, you know, different people have different character traits that they're working on. You know, some people in this room or online, currently learning to be a teacher of the peaceful solution, someone might have a problem with stealing. They might not have learned yet that you can't just go take people's property. You can't just walk in someone's house and walk over to the refrigerator, open it up, and grab something to drink without asking. You can't just barge into someone's house without asking. You can't just take their car without asking. And if there's rules, like if you borrow my car and I have rules on that car and I tell you, hey, I need my car back by 7 o'clock tonight, or if I say, you know, please don't put any fuel in my car, I would rather we just settle up. We'll keep track of what you use and I'll do it myself, because, you know, might be that in my past I had someone take my car and put diesel fuel in it instead of gasoline, or vice versa. You know, those things occur. So if I loaned my car out to you and I gave you some rules to go by, then you would need to go by those rules or expect that you wouldn't be using my car again. Okay, so that's one example. Another example would be if I loan you my ink pen. We're in class and you dropped your pen, you lost it, whatever the case might be. You noticed I had a couple, and I got up and I was heading to go get a drink of water or something. Instead of just grabbing my pen because you needed it, you waited till I got back and you asked me if you could use it. And I would say, yes, you could use my pen, but I might have some rules on it. One of those rules might be, please don't just sit there and scribble and use up all my ink. Does that sound like I'm being a little picky? Well, no. You know, I mean, I've got a lot of pens, but some people don't have a lot of pens. And so if you're sitting there using their ink up on their $1.50 pen or their $10 pen or whatever it might cost, you know, if you're using their ink up, then, hey, they've asked you not to just sit and scribble. Use it for what you need it to use it for. They've given it to you to use, and they put these rules on it. And they expect to have it back at a certain time. Just things like that. Things like that some people haven't learned to overcome. They haven't gotten past those things yet, you know? And they might seem like small things, but yet every one of those things that I just mentioned have the potential to create conflict. And then that conflict has the potential to go a step further into, you know, somebody not liking what's going on, and maybe it turning into rage. Now what's taken place? Well, it even has the potential, I guess we've all seen in the news, where, you know, someone took a pork chop from someone else, or someone took something from someone and grabbed it and ended up getting shot and killed. You know, not too recently in the news I saw something like that. And you read it and you're like, he killed his brother? His blood brother killed his blood brother because he took something off his plate? Okay, well, yeah, he stole, that's a fact. But there's other ways to handle it, you know? So which was worse, the stealing or the pulling out a gun and shooting him for the stealing? You know? Some people might have different guides on what is acceptable that can be stolen from them before they blow off, you know? I mean, some people might think, they just stole a pork chop, let them have it. Or they might think, you know, hey, he used up my $10 worth of gas without permission, I'm not going to say anything, just forget about it, you know. Or, you know, well, He stole $1 million from me. Is that the point where you're going to blow off? Is that the point that you reach to where it's no longer, something that you just forget about, that you're going to turn into a raving lunatic and pull out a gun or something? I mean, so people tend to go by their own set of values and their own range of things when they're deciding what they can or cannot steal, and call it borrowing instead of stealing. You follow me? You see what I mean? Like if I really couldn't care less if you took my pen from me, and I'm used to taking people's pens from them without asking, and I'm being a little minute here, but just to keep it a simple example, then I'm probably not going to blow off into a rage when you do take my pen. It's kind of like I'm used to doing that to others. I'm going to probably let you do it too, right? On the other hand, if it gets to a point to where there's money involved, I might immediately say something to you about it. I might not be the person that goes and takes people's money without asking or something. And so since I have that set in my mind that I wouldn't do that, I'm not going to let you do that to me too. And so I say something to you about it. But then now I have to decide, what am I going to do about it? Am I going to handle it peacefully, or am I going to go off on a fit of rage, So all along the way, we have to make positive moral decisions. And it's all based on our values. It's based on our knowledge of what great moral character is, and based upon our knowledge of what stealing is, and what respect is, and what compassion is, and what all these other character traits that are listed on page 18, on what they are and how to implement them. And the same thing with the negative character traits. We want to stay away from those, so we want to put ourselves away from them. All right, so, but everyone has traits that are less than desirable. And so we have to look at that and see that, well, maybe this guy's problem isn't my problem. I might be past the thing of stealing, but I'm not past the part of calling a person names when they go by and they're not driving the way I want them to drive or something, some disrespect. I might not be past that thing. Others, on the other hand, might be having a problem with stealing, but yet they would never think about calling someone a name that went around them and honking the horn and spinning their tires and everything, I mean, so everyone has a different level of what their problem is, so to speak, what their problem is. The thing, their undesirable trait that they have that maybe I don't have and maybe you don't have, but yet they have. And then the undesirable trait that I have is one maybe they don't have. You see how all that mixes us all around, and we have to learn to get along with each other, and we have to learn to be patient with each other and put up with some of those negative character traits. And in peaceful guidance and teaching, we can get past those things as we all decide to. Anyway, so that shouldn't stop us from striving to overcome our own flaws. We have the ability to make better choices towards others and ourselves, and there's a saying that we all need to internalize. Practice makes perfect. There you go. I mean, if you're practicing the peaceful solution as best you can, then you're practicing perfectly. If you're practicing the peaceful solution, then you are becoming perfect. You could be considered perfect if you're practicing the peaceful solution with all your might, okay? So by rehearsing ways to handle everyday situations with self-control and respect, we can begin eliminating negative traits from our character. Right. As we go along and we find ourselves, oh man, I shouldn't have criticized that guy about that thing, I mean, he's pretty touchy. He wears his feelings on his shirt sleeves and everything, and I know I was a little bit critical. Maybe I could have done it a little better way so that he wasn't offended by it. Thinking back on things. So as we think back on things, we're rehearsing it, and we're looking at ways that we could have handled things differently. at using self-control and respect. We can begin eliminating the negative traits from our character, whatever they might be. Again, go back and look at page 19 right there in the parenting manual, and you're going to see quite a thorough list of negative character traits there that you might want to look at and see which ones apply to you. We all have some that are still part of us, okay? So when similar situations occur in real life, we can be ready to handle them with integrity. Integrity means that you will consistently choose to interact with others and solve problems using positive character traits such as compassion, humility, and responsibility. So in rehearsing these things, you can go back and look at some of the things you've done and think to yourself, well, what would I do next time? You're rehearsing. Also, by some of the things that we'll do on some other pages, it's going to be rehearsing and looking at what we could do instead of what maybe we might, in this day and time, we might do it a certain way, but we might look and see, hey, for me to get better at this, I should do it this way. We rehearse it in our mind, and we get used to doing it that way. Consciously developing moral character gives you the power to choose honesty rather than dishonesty, respect rather than disrespect, and to remain calm and in control rather than enraged or out of control. And that's where things, these things get really touchy in there when people get totally out of control and they're in a fit of rage. Looking at these things that we're talking about right here, excuse me, we're going to get to that last paragraph in a minute, but looking at what we've just talked about here, these things are true for all situations, not just parenting. And that's what the peaceful solution is. It teaches us, and we learn every step of the way. Yeah, we have it broken down into certain books, character, respect, acceptance, responsibility, self-control, and so forth, parenting, workplace, building moral excellence. We have all this broken down, different grade groups and so forth, but the basics are the same. And so where we enter it at is like our beginning, like the parenting. A lot of people, that their first indication of the peaceful solution or being introduced to the peaceful solution was because of this parenting manual. They're going to be a parent, or they're wanting to be a parent, and they're looking for something. And someone mentions the peaceful solution has a parenting manual. And so this is the first, the intro to some people, if you will. And so it covers a lot of what we cover in the other books. It culminates with digging into the other books and going deeper into each aspect of it. But it's true for all situations, but it is critical for parenting. You just have to have this to raise that child up in the way they need to be raised up, so they'll be a benefit to society and all mankind and to themselves. So you learn to change and take on a positive moral character through the keeping of basic moral principles. And that's what we've been learning, these basic moral principles along the way. And if I mention some of the steps that you take that we've learned in some of the other books, for those of you who've been here and on this path for a while, you would recognize them right away. Through humility and determination, you can change. What's the humility part? By listening, by actually doing what you're told to do to develop this great moral character and putting it to use in your life. And then the determination to do so, because you have to be determined. Otherwise, you're not going to always hold on to that humility. You're not going to try your best to treat everybody with respect, even though they might be disrespecting you. You have to be very determined to do these things. But you can change with this. The teaching of moral principles can change you and literally remake you from the inside out to become a successful person and parent. Notice from the inside out, because that's where it starts, on the inside. I mean, you can clean up really great and be walking around in a $2,000 suit and really looking slick and everything, and it doesn't matter though. You can do that, or you can be walking around in farmer coveralls and with cow poop all over you or something, and there's no difference. You can't tell the difference between a person's character by looking at those two different examples. You would have to dig deeper. You'd have to look on the inside and see what the person is made of, okay? I mean, there is a certain point in where trying to be clean every day is a great thing. That is a thing that you want to do. But if your job is a mechanic or you work on a farm, you're not going to be walking around as clean as the individual that works in an office and is wearing a suit, right? So you can't use that to judge a person's character by it. You got to go deeper, okay? All right, so anyways, that is... I'm going to go another step here. If we go back to the lesson plan for a minute, Procedure 7, Procedure 8, let me go ahead and finish reading off that. It says, to stress the importance of also evaluating our thoughts and behavior in order to weed out those undesirable traits, which we talked about, and then read the next 4 paragraphs. We did that. So procedure number 9 says to draw students' attention to the paragraph under the heading, the first step on page 20. That's that next little section at the bottom. So let me draw your attention to that. If you look over on page 20, you see the first step, right? That's what it says to do. Draw the students' attention to that. And it says to have the class read the scenarios on page 21 and check out always, sometimes, never as it applies to them, which we are going to do. And then we're going to go back some. So let's first go to the first step on page 20. Excuse me. Take a look at that. We talked about it in the previous paragraphs a little bit. And I remember a card that we had when we would go and introduce the peaceful solution to different entities, whether it be the government, the schools, the Congress, others, when we would introduce it, we had a card, and one of the first steps, of course, was, to take a look at it, to assess the situation, see what you got. You have to admit there's a problem, though. And so these are the first steps to develop this positive moral character. It's to evaluate your choices based upon your responses to moral situations. And we're going to do that. As you complete the following exercise, remember to be honest. You're not tricking anybody but yourself if you're dishonest about it. Your goal should be to gain a greater understanding of your own moral values for the purpose of improving. So see, you have to have a desire to improve. You have to want to do this. And so you take this step and evaluate yourself. So for the purpose of improving yourself as a parent, or parent-to-be, of course, read the scenarios on page 21. Check always, sometimes, or never as it best applies to you. Let's go on over to page 21. All right. So on page 21, we've got character scenarios. We're going to go through some of these. We've got plenty of time here. Look at number 1. So being honest with yourself. Don't look at, I know this particular book has the answers in it. When you look on past this page, don't do that yet. Stay on this page, take a look at it, and answer it honestly. You give your child an instruction and he disobeys, and then what do? You correct him or her immediately. Do you do it always, sometimes, or never? Or if you had a child in the past, did you do it always, sometimes, never? If you're planning on having a child, will it be your intent to do it always, sometimes, or never? And correction is different things in different people's minds, and we'll be talking about that some more too. Number 2, when you are wrong, you admit your mistakes. Would you say you do that always, sometimes, or never? Be honest. When you are wrong, you admit your mistakes. That's a very hard thing to do. Number 3, even when you're upset, you remain calm and deal with situations appropriately. Always, sometimes, or never. So By now, we should be seeing a few things and thinking, wait a minute, do I do this always, or is it just sometimes, or most of the time, or something? But always means always, okay? Someone tries to help you but is unsuccessful. Do you still appreciate their efforts? Always, sometimes, never. Number 5, you are willing to make sacrifices in order to accomplish a worthwhile goal. Always, sometimes, or never. Number 6, you set positive goals and stick with them. Always, sometimes, never. Remember, goal setting is a big thing. There's short-term goals, there's long-term goals. There's goals that might change from short-term to long-term depending upon, the situation. But always, sometimes, or never. Okay, look at number 7. A cashier forgets to ring up an item and you don't say anything to correct it. Would you say you do that always, sometimes, or never? Now, okay, when you become upset, you lash out or throw things. Would you say always, sometimes, or never? Number 9, you readily apologize when you are wrong. By the way, if number 7, if you're looking at that and you think, well, a cashier forgets to ring up an item, and you think, well, it depends on how much it was. Well, you probably ought to put yourself over on the sometimes line there, because I think that does weigh in some people's minds. You readily apologize when you're wrong. Is that always, sometimes, or never? Number 10, your child trespasses on one of your belongings and apologizes. Do you accept the apology of the child? Sometimes, or always, sometimes, or never? Number 11, your child expects you to pick him up from school and you are on time. Always, sometimes, or never? And that could go every way. You're picking up the child for school or dropping the child off, whatever. Is it always, sometimes, or never? Are you always on time, sometimes, or never? When your child complains about his day, you listen quietly and allow him to express his feelings. Is that always, sometimes, or never? Someone cuts you off in traffic. You blow your horn and call him a name. Is that, you do it always? You do it sometimes? You do it never? Do you do it in your head? Think about that part of it. Just thought I'd throw that in there. Number 14, you arrive to work on time. Do you always arrive to work on time? Do you sometimes arrive to work on time? Or do you never arrive to work on time? All right, you have a choice between paying a bill and buying a new outfit. You pay the bill. Is that always, sometimes, or never? Okay, has it gotten too complicated? Have we given up yet? Do we have too many check marks in the wrong column? I mean, all this is something for you to look at, be honest with yourself, look at it, and you have it on paper so you can look at it and see what you need to work on, okay? And we all need to work on different things. This is just helping us a little bit to get to that. All right. So you are broke and find a wallet with money. You return it to the owner. Always, sometimes, or never. And once again, it shouldn't matter how much money was in it. Whether it was $10,000 or whether it was 10 cents. It should not matter how much money was in it on whether you return it or not. I know some people have thought that, I needed money so bad and I found this money and I was blessed with this money to pay my bills. No, it's not yours. It wasn't given to you by somebody. You didn't earn it from somebody. It's not yours. It's there. You stole it. Anyway, I'm not going too deep into all that. We'll get into it. But anyway, this is just things that you can look at and say to yourself, always, sometimes, or never. Do you need to work on that one? You teach your children to respect others. Always, sometimes, or never. That gets really deep, too, on what respect really is. For those of you who haven't been in the classes so far. Okay, number 18. You've asked your child to sit quietly, but she keeps getting up. You get so upset, you grab her arm and yell at her. Would you do that? Always, sometimes, just sometimes. It depends on how out of control she is, or never. Just thought I'd throw that in there. Always, sometimes, or never. 19. School began 2 months ago and you still have not supplied your child with the school supplies. Would you say that's always, sometimes, or never? Do you give your child the things they need to accomplish what they need to do? Number 20. You leave your child sleeping and alone to make a quick run to the store. Always, sometimes, or you would never do that. How many people have seen recently in the news where people left their child in the house and went to the store? Or went to go make a crack deal? Or went to go to the liquor store? Or just went around the block to their friend's house for a few minutes? Or, whatever. You've seen that before in the news, haven't you? That type thing? Yeah, all the time. Or leaving the child, sleeping in the car to run in the store real quick. Windows are up. It's a 90-degree day. Anyway. All right, so we're not going too far into that. This is for you to look at and decide. You look at it, see what you need to work on. If you're honest with it, you should be able to go back and also on page 17, or page 18 and 19, and look at the positive character traits and the negative character traits on those 2 pages and take a look at that and see where you're at. All right, so analyzing your response. This is it right here for the quiz or that you just took, if you will. Analyzing your response. All right, so the correct response for scenarios 1 through 6, 9 through 12, and 14 through 17 is always. That's if you're doing everything right. And you can look on over to page 24 now if you want to. We'll flip back and forth there. So as you can see on page 24, if you have the book, by the way, if you're online there, you should be able to go to a drop-down menu and actually download the book if you don't have a physical copy of it. But you can look and see where it says always, 1 through 6 right there, and then 9 through 12, and then again 14 through 17 should be always. That indicates that you consistently practice the character trait associated with that particular scenario. Pages 18 and 19, for the character traits, so we just talked about that. Now, the correct response for scenarios 7 through 8, 13, 18 through 20 is never. Always and sometimes answers should be taken seriously because they indicate that greater focus needs to be placed on changing these traits to positive ones. So let's look on over to page 24, and it shows us that number 7 and 8, that should actually be a never answer if you're practicing positive character there. If you look at number 13, that should be a never answer if you're practicing positive character. Number 18, 19, and 20 should be a never answer if you're practicing positive character. So I'm sure that we've all seen, including myself, we've all seen something in these 20 scenarios. We've probably all seen something that we need to adjust on a little bit. Because always means always and never means never. If you're a sometimes person, I can tell you, I saw one in particular here that I'm a sometimes person, okay? And, it probably has to do with cars and driving and so forth. But, it's something that I know that I need to deal with. All right? And so that might not be your issue. You might see something else on there that you know that you need to deal with, right? And so that's why this is laid out in this manner. Everyone has different issues that they need to work on, and we understand that in the Peaceful Solution. And It's the sooner we can understand that about each other, the better off we're going to be, and the more patient we'll be with one another. So you see someone doing something that you would never ever do, and you know it's wrong, just remember they might have seen you doing something that they would never do that's totally wrong, and they're thinking the same thing. Once again, it's easy to see and point out the other person's faults. It's not so easy when it comes to your own and looking at yourself in the mirror. Tough action, especially if someone else has a few comments that they throw in along the way. You might not like it too much. All right, so the question comes. It says, what character traits do you need to strengthen? Be honest about it. You can write them down there. If you feel like someone's going to look through your book or something and you don't want them to see it, then keep it in your mind. Best to write them down. What character traits do you need to eliminate? Same thing. Of course, the ones that strengthen, that's an easy one to probably write down. The ones to eliminate, you got to really focus and look at it. What have you learned about your character? It's going to be different for everybody, So when it comes to teaching our children how to have a moral character, well, get this. We must be 100% certain that we as parents are modeling positive traits in what we do and what we choose not to do. Because actions speak louder than words. You've heard the old saying, apple doesn't fall far from the tree, right? Take a look at this. You ever heard about the chip off the old block? Well, there you go. There's the old block, and there's the chip, and there's the microchip right there, okay? So, chip off the old block. It's kind of funny when we look at it that way, but I bet you that here's the dad, here's the son, here's the grandson, and I will bet you anything that son has a lot of the same traits and does a lot of the same things that the dad does. Any of y'all remember that old commercial about the, I forget exactly how they said it, but it had a man and a young man sitting at a tree, and the man was smoking. And as I recall, he laid the cigarette down or something and got up, and then the child ended up getting the cigarette. Like father, like son. Do you remember that? It went something like that. I probably described it horribly wrong, but that was many, 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 many years ago, and it was when smoking was still allowed on TV, smoking commercials, smoking in shows and stuff, and I guess I don't know if they banned it or something, but I know that commercials have been banned for many, many years, cigarette commercials, but back at that time they were still on TV. And so this was like a protest or a group trying to get smoking outlawed. And so people would always tell their children, now you shouldn't smoke, but they'd be sitting there smoking a cigarette. And so here we got the chip off the old block, remember? Right there, you just saw it. That's what goes on. Remember, the child has a lot of its parents' same actions and thoughts and values. They grew up with it, right? Here's one here. What can you expect? Okay, if you're yelling at a child about something they did wrong, right? Or whatever, but you're yelling at a child, maybe they're being a little rebellious or something, you're sitting there out of control yelling at them, then what would you expect from that child? When they have a situation and they get a little bit out of control, what would you expect? They're going to do the same thing they've learned from you. So that's what we're talking about here. When it comes to teaching our children how to have a moral character, we've got to be 100% certain that we as parents are modeling the positive traits in what we do and what we choose not to do. As we go through our daily lives, we are constantly making moral choices about how we treat others, their property, and ourselves. Would you agree? We are. Some people would think, I don't think about all that stuff. I just, I know what to do. Or, well, it was just a knee-jerk response. It was just impulse. No, all of it is choices. We make choices about how we treat others, their property, and ourselves. And we think really, really fast all the time. These moral choices determine our character and make long-lasting impressions on our children. The old sayings, do as I say, not as I do, or I can do it because I'm an adult. Anyone ever heard that one? I have. I've heard that very saying right there. Well, I can do it because I'm an adult. You can't do it. Are only excuses for immoral, negative actions. This will also cause your child to lose respect for you. Also, if you are if you're a thief and your child sees you stealing, like in a store, or they're there when the cashier gives you back too much change, or whatever the case might be, they're also going to learn to steal. It's going to be in them. They will learn that unless you teach them differently. And believe me, actions speak louder than words do. Do as I say, not as I do. We hear that from parents. I mean, I can attest to every one of these things I'm fixing to tell you. I can attest that I have heard that from parents. I have heard that from teachers. I have heard that from guardians, babysitters, guardians, trusted mentors, etc. I have heard that very thing. Have you? Have any of you ever heard those things come from the mouths of one of these people when you were younger, as a teenager, as a child? Did you ever hear that thing? Or more so, did you ever see that thing? Meaning, they tell you, do as I say. And they don't say nothing about not as I do, but you see it. You see that they're telling you to do something differently than what they're doing. But which one do you think is going to hit home more? It's what you see them do. Actions speak loud. They speak louder than the words. So what we are really saying with these excuses is that in spite of our poor example, our children, or those we're responsible for, workers, others we're teaching, whatever the case might be. This is a parenting book, and we're talking specifically about children, but I do want to point out that it applies everywhere. So what we're saying, that despite, with these excuses, in spite of our poor example, our children should nonetheless develop a positive moral character? No, this is not only unrealistic, and we need to understand this. These aren't just words. It's easy to sit here and read this and then just go on about our day and go back to what we were doing and continue getting in arguments in front of people, in front of the children, in front of others, and arguments and yelling and calling each other names and threatening and so forth and so on. And we do this, but yet we teach that we shouldn't do it? Children. I know the author of The Peaceful Solution looked at me as a child. He looked at me as a child in learning peace, in learning the proper way to conduct myself. And for those of you in this meeting room that knew the author of The Peaceful Solution, you know that he also looked at you as a child, as a son or a daughter, if you will. And so he looked at us, and he knew that he had to be the example of how we should conduct ourselves. And so, what do? Once again, what we're really saying with these excuses of, do as I say, not as I do, is that in spite of our poor example and our poor character, our children should nonetheless develop a positive moral character? This is not only unrealistic, but also unfair. How can we expect our children, our students, to learn what is the moral and correct way to behave if we are not modeling right behavior ourselves? Who are we? Who are we to do that? For example, the parent who expects their child to be humble and obedient, but discriminates steals, puts others down, is teaching their child to be dishonest and disrespectful. You got that? For example, the parent who expects their child, their student, to be humble and obedient, but yet they discriminate, steal, or put others down, is teaching their child, their student, every child is a student, and every student is a child, to be dishonest and disrespectful. In like manner, the parent who tells their child not to say mean things about their sibling, but will gossip about their neighbor, is teaching their child to disrespect others. How about that? Isn't it interesting how this parenting manual, that, it's there for those desiring to be a parent. This manual right here that I'm showing you on the overhead right now, this parenting manual, it's there for those desiring to be a parent or that are going to be a parent raising a child. And so isn't it interesting that all of what applies here also applies in life with others, with life with students, with co-workers, with subordinates, with siblings, with other students, other children, all of this. It all applies. It's not just about you and your child. Yes, that's how you came across this book, probably. But it's not just about you and your child. When you learn how to conduct yourself this way and put that kind of care and concern forth to raise your child up in the right manner, you will also be showing that same care and concern for your spouse, for your co-workers, for your students, and for everybody around you. The two go hand in hand. You cannot do one and you cannot do the one and not do the other. Do you follow me? You will never, ever, ever be that 100% positive parent modeling to your child and teaching your child what to do properly if you are not practicing it with everyone in your life. Never, ever. So this is a great point that you started at in learning how to treat your child and how to raise your child. And, great job. You started out right. And this will take you further than you ever thought possible in starting out with this parenting manual. You thought it was just going to be something so you could learn how to properly discipline your child, how to properly change the diapers, or how to properly feed your child, or what have you, or what to do in tough situations. You thought it was going to be that, probably. I don't know. But look what it's come into. Look what a great blessing this will be in your life when you learn how to treat everybody this way. Because you have to. You have to. To treat your child right, you've got to treat everybody right. You can't take it part of the time and throw it away. Because then you would be answering all those questions we just went through. You just go down and listen, put sometimes, right? You have to put always, or never would I do that thing, okay? So let me see. We've got a few more minutes. I just want to mention that the bottom line is that as parents, we must be very careful what we say with our mouths and what we reflect in our actions. Because your child's going to be watching how you treat others too, get it? Our children are tuned into every detail of who we are and what they see and hear from us that shapes their characters. So you are teaching by your actions. And doesn't it make sense then that we should develop traits such as self-control, respect, responsibility, and thankfulness? And as you develop them to teach your child, you'll be developing them to everybody and how you conduct everyone. Just to name a few. If we want our children to develop these same traits, as we wholeheartedly adhere to basic moral principles, we become perfect role models for our children. The old saying, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, or he's a chip off the old block, summarizes the importance of developing a positive moral character so that our children can do the same. And then if you look at the bottom statement there, it says a great personality without a positive moral character is like building a beautiful house on a bed of quicksand. So we're going to stop right there. The next class we'll do probably a little bit of review, and then we'll move on to taking care of the final procedures, which we actually have done some of already, because we've already been to through the scenarios and analyzing the response and so forth. So we're going to finish up with that, finish up completely with chapter 3 or lesson 3, and we'll go on to lesson number 4, and that'll be in the next class, which is on 5/28/2025, Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. Look forward to seeing everybody again. And, you know, hey, who knew that learning to be a parent, you'd learn to be a better person all the way around? Isn't that awesome? All right, great. Thank you.